Hey everybody, welcome to Intuit's Journey to InnerSource. I'm your host, Vasudha Swaminathan, Director of Product for Stack Overflow for Teams. Before we begin, we have one housekeeping item, folks. You will notice there's a box at the bottom left of your screen for questions. Please enter your questions there and they will be covered during the audience Q&A. Now, without further ado, let's meet our amazing panelists today, members of the engineering team at Intuit. If you can tell us your name, your role, and how long you've been at Intuit, that'll be perfect. I'm going to popcorn it over to Rocio to get us going.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Rocio Montes.
Rocio, you may be on mute.
Can you hear me? No? Yes, can you hear me now? Okay.
No, can't hear you.
Hi, everyone. Uh-oh. Harith, you can hear me? Matt, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Rocio.
You want to try coming back, and we'll start with Matt and Harith in the meantime. All right, let's go to Matt.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm a senior software engineer. I've been with Intuit for about 4 years now. I primarily work on the InnerSource program here, as well as our open source efforts. And I'll go ahead and kick it over to Harith.
Hey, good morning and afternoon, everybody. My name is Harith. I'm an engineer in the Intuit Capital team. I've been with Intuit for 10 years. And my team happened to be one of the teams that adopted InnerSource. And I guess this is the reason why I'm here. Happy to be here as well. Do we have Rocio back?
Yeah. My name is Rocio Montes. I am a staff software engineer here at Intuit, and I am the lead for the open source office and InnerSource office here at Intuit. My team and I create all of the automation, the dashboards, and the processes to make those two initiatives successful.
Great. Thank you, Rocio, Matt, and Harith. Let's get this going, right? Let's kick this off. So, folks, our first question. Why don't we start off by discussing what is InnerSource and why has it been a priority for Intuit?
Right. So I can definitely kick this off by, explaining what is InnerSource and why is it important. So with InnerSource, we're pretty much taking the lessons learned from developing open source software, and we apply them into how companies develop software internally. So bringing all those principles of openness, collaboration into our Intuit ecosystem is very important for us. You may not know this, but Intuit is on a journey to become a platform company. And in order for us to have capabilities that can be reduced and contributed to, we rely on InnerSource to make this platform journey a reality. Now, InnerSource is important because it will let us innovate as a whole into an ecosystem, creating capabilities.
I think we have an audio issue.
Yeah, I lost Rocio's audio as well. All right, folks, we're going to wait for Rocio to come back, but perhaps we can proceed along and get to the next question, and then we'll have Rocio come back and share with her. Oh, Rocio, are you back? Can you hear us?
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did everyone stop listening to me? But that's okay. I'll just give maybe just a short answer now. But hopefully everyone heard.
Platform. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So Intuit is on a journey to become a platform company, which is why InnerSource, it's important and at the heart of Intuit. There are many benefits to why there are many benefits as to why we should use InnerSource, and that's because we are going to be able to innovate as a one Intuit ecosystem. It's going to be easier to find and reuse code at a broad scale. Definitely, we're going to reuse planning dependencies. What that means is instead of communicating through meetings and having discussions about prioritization and resourcing, we can just go ahead and write code. It will definitely ensure a culture of openness at Intuit.
Absolutely, Rocio. That's really well said, and I loved how you started off by saying it's a platform to begin with, right? All right, let's move to the next question, panelists. In recent years, we've seen more and more companies adopting InnerSource as an approach to developing software within their organizations. Can you tell us a bit about how Intuit went about doing just that?
Yeah, I can probably take that one. We basically took a two-pronged approach to developing our InnerSource guidelines. First, we went on as a team, kind of a global listening tour, traveling from Intuit site to Intuit site, and really just trying to find out, get feedback from the teams, both from leadership and from individual contributors, engineers. Basically trying to find out, what do they think InnerSource is? What concerns do they have about working in more of an open source, open collaboration model? And what benefits do they think they would get from working in this way? And so once we kind of created that shared vision around what InnerSource means at Intuit, we also kind of combined that with research from external companies. So, looking at how other companies like PayPal and, the groups that contribute to the InnerSource Commons, community, finding out how the pitfalls that they ran into and incorporating that feedback into our guidelines. Taking that both internal feedback and external research is how we were able to develop, guidelines around 3 core pillars, which we refer to as InnerSource readiness, activity, and engagement. And those were kind of our guiding principles around, how to develop metrics for InnerSource adoption.
Matt, thank you. I loved how you went about doing both internal and external research. So that's quite a thorough approach to figuring out how we get this going. Thank you for sharing. Next question, folks. Given Intuit has over 5,000 engineers working remotely, we are curious to understand how you introduced InnerSource to all of them and how were you able to get everybody involved in this process?
Right. So one of the first steps that we had to do in order to kick off the InnerSource initiative was to unify the guidelines that already existed across the company about InnerSource. So InnerSource is definitely, has always been in the back of our minds, the collaboration mindset. And before it was an official initiative, every org and every team had some guidelines around how we wanted InnerSource to work. So the first step was to unify all those guidelines and identify the one Intuit way in which we wanted to contribute across repositories. So once we had that, we we took these guidelines into what our chief architect Alex Balash calls the beautiful code tours, which are visits that he would do along with myself and Alisa Carpio, who is a technology evangelist at Intuit, and we would visit many Intuit development offices, and we will share these guidelines with the teams and listen to engineers and listen to what were their blockers for contributing to other repositories, working on offices that are not the headquarters. What were the challenges of contributing? So pretty much it was a listening tour to understand everything that was going wrong and how we can make it better. So once we understood all the feedback, we moved on to, just creating ways to make InnerSource more easy to our engineers by, creating paved roads that will allow engineers to be InnerSource ready off the bat. At Intuit, we have, a term that it's called paved roads, and in which engineers can just generate repositories that already have continuous integration, continuous deployment, environments, and we put InnerSource there as well, right? So off the bat, you have a repository that's InnerSource ready. Additionally, we created a dashboard, and Matt is going to talk about it in a little bit, but we created a dashboard to track how teams were doing against those InnerSource guidelines, making sure that all of our efforts are measurable and trackable was also very important for us.
Yeah, so I can also add here. So I was a tech lead for a team that is responsible for building an SDK that goes into the build of most of the Java services at Intuit. In my team, we're 5, and we were supporting more than 2,000 engineers. So you could do the math yourself. So 1 year into this, we realized, how much overwhelming that was. We quickly realized that there was no way to keep up with the number of requests, of feature requests, enhancements, bugs. And so as a team, we needed to really spend significant amount of time in doing all the priority work, working with stakeholders. We had, a PMO just talking to all teams and making sure that every quarter we have a set clear of priorities. And with InnerSource, I think what that meant to us is rather than having every team wait in line and work with the PMO to prioritize their work and explain why their work is important, is we opened our GitHub, right? So every team member could just submit a PR, and as long as the PR adheres to our coding standards and quality checks, we also, from our part, we commit to help them to contribute back. That PR could just make it to the next SDK release, right? And for me or my team, that meant that we can now focus on the bigger, meatier problems, right? Maybe the next gen of our code base, or the next big feature that is needed, say, a couple of quarters down, right? Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Harith, I wouldn't be in your position. 5 engineers supporting 2,000 developers. That does sound overwhelming. I also want to say, Rocio, the beautiful code paths and paved tours, such a wonderful way to coin that. Might steal that for ourselves here. So thank you for sharing. So
go ahead.
All right. Next question, panelists. What was your biggest obstacle to adopting an InnerSource approach at Intuit?
Right. So I talked a little bit ago about the unified guidelines and how we needed to talk to all the different orgs and the different teams to come to an agreement about the one Intuit way to, practice InnerSource. And I think that was, early on, one of the biggest obstacles, just because teams had been accustomed to do it a certain way. And different teams at Intuit had different owners, so getting time with them to accept how we wanted to do, these unified guidelines was a little bit of troublesome. I'm not going to call it like super difficult, but it was definitely troublesome. And the same goes with, the paved roads, because each paved road has their own owner. So getting in touch with, the paved road for a Java service, the paved road for our plugins, a front-end component, and getting them to change their documentation, to onboard to the InnerSource guidelines was definitely a little bit challenging. Matt, you're muted. No, we can't hear you, Matt, yet.
Yeah, I can go ahead till Matt come back. So for me or my team, adopting InnerSource meant that we really needed to commit and investing, to make contributions easy, which meant that we needed to update our documentation, improve our documentation, whether in docs or whether within the code. We really needed to look at our code that this code is no longer going to be used by me and my 4 engineers, but rather it's going to be used by 2,000 engineers, right? So is the code easy to read? Is the code easy to navigate? Is it easy to test? Easy to run it locally, right? So we had to run all those checks and really prove out that contributions could be made easy. Another thing that we did, and I think that worked out quite well for us, is we used to have a quarterly newsletter that share the latest news, new features. We share out tips and tricks. And so we decided to have a new section in the newsletter where we highlight the best contribution of the quarter. So prior to releasing the newsletter, me and my team, we sit and look at all the contributions that were made in the last quarter and vote among us on which is the best contribution. And whatever the chosen is, we highlight that. We highlight the problem, how it was solved, and the complexity and the impact of that. And in addition, we highlight the person who made that contribution, right? And I think that really threw a good provided a good incentive. And it also confirmed that.
Is it just me, or did we?
I think we lost him.
Okay.
Am I back by chance?
Yes,
like,
Matt, you're back.
Segue. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and pick up where Harith left off, and just say that his description of sharing out with the recognizing InnerSource contributors is a pretty big tip to give back to the community on the call here, because that is actually one of the pain points that I've seen from some teams that have been trying to adopt InnerSource, and that's giving adequate recognition not only to the contributors themselves, but also the maintainers that spend the time to help shepherd new contributors onto their code base, get them up to speed quickly and get those features merged in. So making sure that there's adequate recognition both for maintainers as well as contributors, I think is super important for fostering InnerSource adoption. And another pain point that we kind of had was really around gaining alignment prior to a contribution is kind of kicked off. So making sure that product managers are part of the loop and are part of the journey at the outset, so that there's alignment there on what changes are coming down from external contributors, getting everyone aligned at the outset. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt, Rosie, Harith. Yeah, folks, today is the day of audio difficulty, so thank you for bearing with us as we get past this. But so much was covered in this last question, but it feels like recognition was the theme of the day, and you all really called out how important it is for not just the maintainers, but also the contributors to be recognized to keep this going, right? So thank you, panelists, for sharing that with us. Next question, assuming you can still hear me, were there any tools you used to aid in the adoption of InnerSource?
So I'll take that, hopefully. Yeah, so there's a few tools that we use. I think probably the most obvious would be, our reliance on GitHub. That's kind of critical for tracking our InnerSource activity and engagement, making, tracking PRs and kind of, correlating that to our org chart and seeing, is InnerSource actually happening, right? But in order to, aid the development of our InnerSource dashboard, we've also developed an in-house tool for scanning an InnerSource repository. We actually just submitted that to open source. So if you go to github.com/Intuit and search for InnerSource Scanner, you'll see the tool that our team developed there that kind of fed into our dashboard to get some insights on InnerSource readiness, one of those 3 pillars that I talked about earlier. But that's kind of InnerSource from a code point of view, but there's also InnerSource in terms of knowledge and Q&A, right? It's how do you share that Q&A content, and facilitate onboarding and reduce support, burden, kind of getting a community around the knowledge that is traditionally, housed in the brains of the maintainers, right? And for that, I'd say that our adoption of Stack Overflow for teams, our enterprise Stack Overflow instance, really helped out a lot in that regard.
Great, Matt. Yes, the InnerSource readiness. I'm sure we're gonna get some questions around that as well. But that's a super interesting way to sort of figure out, whether you're ready to get this going or what needs to be filled, what gaps need to be filled, right? So speaking of Stack Overflow, I gather that the adoption of teams at Intuit has been a rather interesting journey. Can you take us through it? Also, perhaps highlighting how it supported the InnerSource movement and any benefits that you've seen thus far?
Yeah, I can take a stab and take it back time in history. So this takes me back more than 2 years ago. So I was the technical lead of the team that I mentioned multiple times already. And during my time we had a Slack channel where that was really the channel to ask any question. So it was just we had over 800 engineers at some point, I recall, and we would be getting all sorts of questions, all sort of questions like, hey, I need this feature. When is that feature coming? I did this and I got that. Is that expected? How can I do this more efficiently? I'm doing this. Is this really the best way to do it, right? And we had a weekly rotation where a support engineer would be answering all those questions. And then at some point, we decided to take really a step back and really look at the root cause of these questions. And we realized some of them are really, a product of having a lack of documentation, or maybe we need to provide more example, or maybe we need to provide a better, intuitive API, right? So we try to address all these issues here. Did that really make a dent? Probably no. Maybe it helped slightly, but nothing in a significant way. Deep inside us, we knew that we needed a forum of a Q&A, and we realized that Slack is not the right place for that. There is no, we knew that our Slack channel has a rich amount of information and knowledge there that are just lost. People will be asking, like the same question every other day, and we have to repeat the same answer every other day, right? And it's uneasy to search and find relevant information. And I think that really what proved to us that a better forum is the right thing to do. And then something I think came interesting, or started to surface, which is sometimes an engineer from team A would ask a question, and before I go and jump and answer the question, or somebody from my team go and answer the question, another random guy from team B would answer that question, or would point them to the answer that was answered a couple days ago, which to us, I think it was an aha moment that, hey, there is a community here that helping each other. People know the information, the knowledge is shared. How can we retain that knowledge? And how can we ensure we really fuel that community? And I think that really what made us really to look for Stack Overflow. And I think that was exactly at the time when Stack Overflow Enterprise became official. And so it became, a viable option. And I think that's how it started. I'll hand it off to Matt. I think Matt could now explain, once it made it through, how did they expand it to be part of every Intuit engineer's life?
Yeah, thanks, Harith. So I basically got involved in the Stack Overflow initiative at Intuit by trying to address that aha moment that Harith noticed, where the Slack channels were getting those recurring questions over and over again. And as we were setting up Stack Overflow, for Teams, the Enterprise Edition, we wanted to get that Slack integration in there to funnel more engineers into Stack Overflow and get that content preserved and start building communities around the questions, which the questions are durable, and it's the answers that kind of evolve and change over time. And having that community around those questions and to keep the answers relevant, I think is one of the the big kind of InnerSource moments for Stack Overflow. And as far as how we went about scaling Stack Overflow at Intuit, we really basically took a kind of a training approach, kind of a global training approach, where first we had to educate ourselves because we were not really experts on the administration of Stack Overflow and learning about how to be a moderator. But once we were kind of feeling comfortable with the tool, we wanted to scale our team, and the way we did that was identifying site leads, for each of the Intuit sites around the world, and designating someone who could be kind of the liaison for that site, and to train additional moderators at that site, or if teams at that site wanted to get their content into Stack Overflow, how to go about setting up tags and things like that. So we created a whole bunch of initial tags that were pretty closely related to the high traffic support channels in Slack. And we had some pretty great anecdotes where, some of these heavily trafficked, Slack channels would reduce their support interruptions and support requests by as much as 30% after, getting their content preserved and a community built in Stack Overflow.
Fantastic, Matt and Harith. 30%, wow. Reducing interruptions by a third of how much was happening before was probably really helpful for a lot of folks there. I really appreciated the level of detail both of you went into. Harith, I could almost imagine that random member from Team B responding to the question from Team A. But so much of what you've shared is something we hear from our customers, that aha moment, right? It is indeed a community, and everyone is in here sort of creating this knowledge. So thank you for going into the details there. All right, next question, panelists. Where do you see this going, the InnerSource movement? And how do you see this evolving at Intuit in the future?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start on that one. So for Stack Overflow at Intuit, my best guess here is that the APIs that are available to us are probably going to be leveraged in more unique and interesting ways to better integrate Stack Overflow with other internal tools and products that we have. For example, our developer portal, which kind of lists all of our platform services. I could definitely see having that Q&A content being front and center and featured in developer portal. I could also see the Slack integration improving to further improve that 30% number. Being able to more effectively funnel support requests and surface that content in Stack Overflow by using the API. I think some of our teams are already starting to do that. As far as the InnerSource, kind of the core code development collaboration, my guess there would be that we're going to start adding additional metrics to our guidelines to kind of show the benefits of InnerSource in terms of a product backlog. Seeing how these heavily dependent teams are engaging with InnerSource and how that translates to a reduced product backlog, I think would be a pretty big win there. So.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I'd love to see contributions made easier, right? And I think how can we really make it easier for everybody to jump into any code base and make a contribution, right? And as somebody or as a team that opens their GitHub, I think I'm really curious on some metric, really to get an idea of how much of my code base is really contributed by InnerSource. What's the percentage of that? Is it 5%, 3%, 8%? And how that number is evolving over time? and and the impact of those contributions, right? Because I think we also want to highlight that, hey, whatever I'm providing is really supported or is built as InnerSource. So I think that's quite a significant milestone. Another thing is just along the lines of how easy we made it is. I think we have to find a way to measure like how much hand-holding needed for an InnerSource, right? And I think to reach a level of, hey, everything is really fully automated, I'm able to say do a percentage of PRs and contributions without really getting on a call or getting on a on a Slack conversation. I think is a big milestone to have.
I think I would add that aside from all these metrics and all the tech that we have put in place, that we would start focusing now a little bit more on the culture around InnerSource, because it's not only about the technology changes, but also the culture in which, for example, every PR can be an opportunity for mentorship, and every engineer sees it that way, right? Like you get a PR and it's not about like, oh my gosh, I'm getting yet another PR on my code, but it's like, oh great, let me teach this person about my code base and let me help them get their contribution merged. There is definitely still a long way that we have to go when it comes to culture, and that's something that we have to focus training our engineers and to accept those contributions, and like I said, to see every PR as an opportunity for mentorship.
I loved how two folks spoke about the metrics aspect of it, right? Like, how do we really move those numbers up and measure and see the impact? And then Rocio comes in and says, there's also the culture. Don't forget about that, right? But that was really beautifully said, folks, and agreed, right? Like, thinking of each PR as a mentorship opportunity really sort of flips it on its head versus thinking about it more as, okay, who else has now touched this, right? Like, what else is going on? Like, yeah, love how you want to make this feel like an opportunity to teach someone, does essentially scaling yourself, right, at the organization. So thank you, folks. That was really well covered by all three of you. All right, so folks, before we open it up to live Q&A, I have one last question for our panelists here. For those of the folks here that may be considering moving to an InnerSource model within their organization, do you have any specific advice for them?
Sure, I can kick it off. So kind of going back to what our strategy was at the beginning there, with the listening tour that our team, that Rocio led there, kind of going around the world. But I think that was really critical, right? Getting that shared vision early on and trying to get all teams to buy into the same set of benefits and trade-offs and what InnerSource means to them. I think is incredibly important. So that shared vision, that motivation, but also I'd say that the other thing that you should really focus on is start small, start as an experiment. Try to prove out those benefits that you think you're going to get early on, and then scale from there, right? So get some quick wins, have some pilot teams and iterate if necessary, and then just start scaling that up to more and more teams.
Yeah, a bit here. I think to me it's really significant and important to explain why InnerSource is important, right? I think we have to explain the why, and I think maybe and naturally we may jump into how we do it, and this is the ways and the tools to do it. But I think if we explain the why, I think this will really make it easy to be adopted. I think we as a community here, or we may give a guideline or set of recommendations, but I think in order for InnerSource to succeed, the whole community and the 5,000 has to adopt it, right? And I think once they understand the why, I think they will really quickly get it and become integral part of the success. I think to me, the other value that many people may not see is how, InnerSource really gives you an opportunity to really value good design and good code and clean code, right? If you really design and abstract and modularize your code, correctly, you really make it easy to contribute. You really increase the adoption of your InnerSource. So I think it's a win-win in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would add that whenever you start your InnerSource journey, that you need to include not only engineers but other disciplines. At Intuit, we have additionally trained product managers and project managers. In that beautiful code tour that I mentioned, we had special sessions with product and project managers to explain to them the benefits of InnerSource and how InnerSource, could be helpful for the organization, because it's definitely a whole company effort and not just the engineering organization.
Really nicely said. And as a product person, I am so thrilled to hear that this was something that was shared with project managers as well as product managers at the organization. Matt, I loved how you started with the listening again. That really has struck a chord with me here about how the teams there went about doing listening tours to first understand where the issues are, and agree with you, Harith, the why, the motivation, which oftentimes gets forgotten, right? So we need to sort of start there as we think about rolling out InnerSource to our organizations. Thank you, Rocio, Matt, and Harith, for sharing Intuit's journey to InnerSource so comprehensively. Let's now jump into the audience Q&A portion of our session. First question, panelists. Who have been your biggest internal champions for InnerSource?
I can take a stab at this. I really got inspired by two engineers in my team, and I think that's really one of the ways to succeed. I think, and that maybe adds to my previous answer, right? That the team has to really embrace this and really enjoy it. And so I had two engineers, Greg and Alex, who both really loved the idea. One of them is really active, who's Greg, who's active in the open source community at Intuit, right? So he knows exactly what's needed for open source. So I think he really invested a lot in making a success, and likewise, Alex. And I think this adds to Rocio's comment about the culture. And I think the team also looked for this as an opportunity to really give good feedback in PRs, right? So like, hey, you could do it better, or hey, this is a good idea. This is really a good feature. But what if you do it that way? Now you even, unlock even more opportunities here. Now you could really flex it even more. And now you're not just thinking about your specific use case, but now let's abstract the problem, a little more, right? So I think these type of engineers, I think they inspire us every day, and I think they were my true champions. In addition to all the great work that Matt and Rocio and Eliza have been providing since day one.
I'll go ahead and follow that up with. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Matt. Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, I'm not a particular name or anything like that, but a strategy that we use to kind of recognize our internal champions. We have a badging system at Intuit where, for initiatives like InnerSource, we can go ahead and award, individuals that kind of go above and beyond. And so we do have an InnerSource badge. And, we have countless names that we've awarded this badge to. So we have tons of champions basically across the company. We have a pretty large company. So, just wanted to add to that. But
thank you, Matt. All right. So I'm going to go with our next question here. Do you use a single project portal for InnerSource or use a combination of GitHub, Stack Overflow, and something of your own?
So I'll start with that one, I guess. So we have the dashboard, which kind of tracks our metrics that I was referring to, the readiness, the activity and engagement. As far as surfacing, opportunities for InnerSource, we utilize an in-house developed portal that kind of relies on integration with Jira. So we basically have teams create Jira issues with a label that says good first issue, and then those are tracked and related to a GitHub project, right? So teams can go to that portal, find out where some opportunities to contribute are, and then start jumping into the documentation. So that's an in-house developed tool there.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. All right, next question. You mentioned the concept of paved roads. What would you recommend be the first paved road solution or integration that should be addressed for it to be successful? How would you identify them?
Right. So what our paved roads are pretty much these automation. Let's say that I want to start off with a new service, a Java service. So I actually go to our development portal, and then I say, okay, I want to create a new service. It's going to be, and I'm going to have options, Java, Node, Python. And then when I select Java, I get asked a couple questions. And then, like I mentioned, the repository, the deployment pipelines, the pre-production environments, all of that gets automatically set up for us. And that has been a real, game changer for engineers, because now I don't have to worry about permissions, setting up environments, or, creating a ticket to get an environment set up. It's just automated. The work that we do for automating those paved roads for InnerSource was that the repository that gets created off the bat will have the documentation standards to make InnerSource successful. And what I mean by that is having a code owners file, a pull request template, a contributing.md, and making sure that the README has all the sections needed to make contributions more easy. So having clear instructions on how to do local development, having sections for who to call if you have a problem. So that's what we have done to make InnerSource be integrated with our paved roads. Now, to going back to the question, where should you start? If you have something similar set up, I suggest that you can analyze which type of assets is more common and what gets created more often, and try and start there, right, with the most popular one.
Yep, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And sounds like automation for the win. All right, panelists, next question. How did you take care of access and authorization for the projects that were contributing to InnerSource?
I can jump really quick on that question. We do not provide access to all. So we have obviously at Intuit multiple GitHub repositories on our GitHub Enterprise, instance, but not everybody has access to all the repo, write access, that is, to all the repositories at Intuit. So what we promote with InnerSource is the use of forks. So just like in open source, anybody can contribute to a repository by forking and then submitting a PR. So that's how we solve for access management.
Perfect, Rocio, thank you. All right, folks, final question of the day. Can you recommend any resources for me to start learning about what other companies are doing around InnerSource? What did you rely on?
So I'll go ahead and start with that one. I mentioned it earlier, but in addition to your own company, right, just doing that listening tour, you can also go and check out the InnerSource Commons community. Just search for that keyword, InnerSource Commons, and you'll be able to see what other companies what challenges they're facing and some materials there, strategies that they have. So we actually relied on that a fair bit at the early stages for creating our guidelines as well. And, as far as other general resources, I also mentioned, but, feel free to go to Intuit's open source community over there at github.com/Intuit. And we have some InnerSource, tools and tips and tricks that we posted there. So feel free to use both of those.
I would also suggest to look over PayPal's case for InnerSource. They have written a lot of handbooks and guidelines to InnerSource, and pretty much they are the ones who started the whole initiative and coined the term. But they do have really nice resource and a lot of cases and situations that then they provide a solution and how they went about solving for those use cases. So I think that's also a good resource.
Fantastic. Folks, that concludes our webinar. Rocio, Matt, Harith, thank you so much for your time today and for plowing through the audio difficulties we had early on. We made it through the webinar. Appreciate all the in-depth responses as well to all of the questions, both from us as well as from our audience. If I had to summarize our key takeaways of this webinar, which is extremely difficult, I gotta say, because you all touched on so many different things today for us. My top 5, first, start with listening to your engineering teams so that organizations can understand the current issues. And remember both the internal research and the external research, right? Second, understand the motivations to introducing InnerSource, the why. How will you measure the ROI? And make sure it works for the needs of your team. Next, train the entire company around it. Don't forget your product managers. I'm kidding. Not just the engineering team. InnerSource impacts everybody. 4, make sure you have the tools necessary to helping your teams adopt the process. And finally, folks, don't forget to recognize and celebrate InnerSource needs to be the new norm, and encouraging participation by recognizing those that are doing it will only make the adoption go faster. Thank you again, panelists, and to all our attendees today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, folks.
Thank you very much.